All right, friends, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. My name is Blaine Smith, and I'm here as always with my good friend and business partner, Brandon Young. And we're two friends with one question, half an hour, and zero script. Interesting question today, and I thought it might be a really quick one to answer, but the more I've thought about it, the more I realize none of these are going to be quick answers, but we'll do our best. So the question is...
Isn't that the way?
The question is, essentially, what do you do if you're somebody who has never really wanted to be a leader, doesn't necessarily love managing people or being in charge, and yet through some series of events, you find yourself in a position where you've got to manage people or you've got to express some leadership and you do in fact need to be in charge. So what advice would we have for somebody who wants to be successful? They want to do a good job in what they've been assigned to do, but in their heart of hearts has never really wanted to be in charge, has never really aspired to be a leader, and maybe doesn't even particularly like managing people yet. Here we are. So what do we do for that person, given the fact that there are probably more of them than you might think? I think there's probably a variety of reasons people end up in this spot. So
right.
I'll kick it over to you. What do you think? What advice might you have for that kind of person?
Well, my first reaction is that oftentimes life gives us what we need, not what we want.
Oh, going deep right out of the gates. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, why mess around? You know me. I have no tolerance for surface conversations. Maybe you don't want to be a leader, but maybe you actually need to be a leader is where I would start with. And I would just offer that as opportunity for consideration. And it's not to suggest or dismiss what the circumstances are. You know, you could still feel like I don't want this, and yet also be willing to be open to exploring whether or not this is something that is to shape you in a way that is generative, in a way that is positive. You know, there's this paradigm called the false self and the true self. And sometimes I think we get locked into the false self a little bit. Maybe your true self actually is that you're supposed to be a leader. And maybe the fact that you start out not exactly seeking that leadership ends up being a massive asset to you in terms of the way that you show up and your humility and your willingness to relate and connect to others who maybe are just trying to do a really good job. And so, I mean, right out of the gates, just kind of, I guess it's racing to the rock bottom of this matter. I don't know. Life tends to give us what we need, not what we want. And I would start with that. So, you know, for those of our friends that are out there that, you know, maybe this resonates with you and it feels like, you know, geez, man, like I didn't really want to be a leader. I don't know. Maybe start by exploring, why did you get chosen to be a leader in the first place? And start there, because there's probably a good reason. There's probably a really good reason why you got chosen to be a leader.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So there are two things that I'm picking up on. One is be willing to maybe move outside yourself for a moment, take a broader perspective, imagine what someone else might be seeing in you, think about why you've been selected for this role, because there's probably some indicators there that you can build from. I'll take the other side of that coin, maybe to build upon your comments and say, it may be worth starting off by taking some time to consider why you feel this way at all. There are probably reasons throughout your history and throughout your life that have led you to feel this way. And some of them may be totally valid and directionally correct. And others may just be a story that you've built up in your head that isn't fully true. Maybe you had some struggles as a younger person in a leadership role and you just decided that you didn't like it because it was hard, or you didn't feel, you know, in your own skin in that role. Maybe
I never want to feel that way again.
Exactly. Maybe you've had some bad leaders or bad managers, and so you've built up some associations with the boss, and you've just kind of decided in your head that you don't want to be the boss. You don't want to be the person in the office or in the workplace or on the team that's telling people what to do or taking more than their fair share or whatever the case may be. So it's possible that it's almost certain, in fact, that throughout one's life, you've developed some associations with what it is to be a leader, or what it is to be a manager, or what it is to be the boss. And it's possible that you, to kind of use your language, Brandon, just don't see yourself in that light. And it may not be necessarily a super strong reflection of your skills, your assets, your attributes, your preferences. It may be just that there's a story, an archetype. There's something you've built up about what it is to do that role and who you are. And you don't see a lot of overlap between the two. And so you may be rejecting it or not wanting to move towards it for reasons that could fairly easily be overcome with a little bit of introspection, a little bit of reflection on the topic, maybe.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, we can go in a host of different directions here as well. And my next question is, well, if you don't want to be a leader, then why did you accept the job?
Do you want me to rattle off some possible reasons?
Sure.
I'm going to start with the obvious one, which is money, right? Let's say
cheddar cheese.
Let's say, I mean, this is real life, right? Let's say you're an individual contributor at an organization, and let's say you're an accountant. You work in finance, and you make a decent living in that role, and suddenly there's a vacancy, and maybe you're the best individual contributor accountant. You know your stuff the best. You've been there the longest. And now somebody needs to take that management role that leads a team of 4 accountants. And perhaps you didn't saw yourself in that role, but it gets offered to you, and it's a 30% pay bump. You've got a family. This is real life again. So maybe you take the role, even though you're not crazy about some of the additional duties that come with it, because there's some real life practical reasons to do that. So I'd say that's an obvious one. I mean, it could be even just the role. You might feel like you're supposed to get promoted, right? I've been in this role long enough. Maybe I should move on to something else. I think you could get pressured into it.
I think that one right there, I think that one right there plagues organizations. It certainly plagues organizations where, well, gosh, this person's been here for 15 years. It's time for them to progress. Said who? Maybe they just want to be an individual contributor. Maybe they want to just keep doing a kick-ass job at what they're doing, and they're perfectly happy doing that. That's okay.
Well, we grew up in the Army. I mean, that might be, for all the things the Army does well, that might be one of its biggest flaws, is it has this up or out mentality, especially in the officer corps, which I came through, which is you do a job for a year, maybe 2, and then you've got to get promoted. You've got to move out. You got to do a different role. And no one ever really has the opportunity to sink their teeth into any one role or be in any one organization for any length of time.
Yeah. Master their craft in the role.
And the Peter Principle is on display everywhere you look in the military, especially within the officer corps, again, because effectively people get promoted to their point of failure. And that's, again, I'm sure there's some wisdom behind why that is the case, but you could very quickly find lots of examples of where that's suboptimal, to say the least.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it begs the question, why can't I have a 35-year-old saw gunner on my team? Exactly. Maybe he just wants to be the best damn saw gunner in the United States Army. I don't know. I mean, sure. But I also would say that my experience thus far suggests that even folks who state that they wish to remain in an individual contributor role harbor very strong opinions about how things should be or how they should go. And therefore, it is my experience oftentimes to look at those folks and say, that's a great idea. Why don't you be in charge?
Yes. Take the Army's side on this argument for a moment, Brandon, if you will. I'd love to hear you riff on this a little bit more.
You cannot be a 17-year squad leader, because the reality of it is that you have leadership that is coming through the pipeline, consistently progressing and going, and you can't, the career privates in the Army, they'll tell you how the whole Army should go. They'll tell you how the generals, should do things, and how the colonels and the captains, the sergeants majors, the first sergeants, and everybody, they'll tell your squad leader how it should go, because they've seen it come and go. But what they haven't seen is the other side, of the equation. They have not seen, and as we all know, as we progress in life, as you progress through the ranks of an organization, whether it be the Army or whether it be out in the commercial sector, so on and so forth, you start to see things differently, or as Joni Mitchell would say, you start to see from both sides now. You understand why the team leaders, the squad leaders, and the platoon sergeants have to do things a certain way. And so I would suggest that to argue on behalf of the old big green machine, which how dare you make me argue on behalf of the big green machine?
You love it.
But thank you thank you as well. You see things differently when you start to progress. You cannot be a 15-year saw gunner because you're stuck. You're not seeing the full picture for what it is, but you think you are. And that's the danger. You think you're seeing all of it, but you're not.
Oh man, that's so good. You're totally right. We've all had those people in different organizations that have been around a long time and kind of think they've seen it all, and they've seen a lot, but they've seen it from a very narrow perspective. And so they've got maybe a very deep but narrow field of view, and leaders, and really for an organization to be successful, we have to have people who have a little bit broader field of view and can put things into their appropriate context from time to time. So what about practical advice here for this person? So they've been promoted, they're in the role. Let's assume this is a person who now is kind of in their first week or two in their first management or leadership role. They've got some direct reports maybe. What are some things we might recommend for them on a more practical level in terms of, the first few weeks in the role, how to appropriately set expectations, set up channels of communication, get to know your people? I mean, I've got lots of things I could just rattle off, but I'd be interested to hear anything you've got, like one or two things maybe that pretty much no matter what field you're in, what industry you're working in, here are a couple things that if you're new to this and you're not feeling super sure-footed, you might want to start with rather than trying to build Rome in a day.
Oh, well, number one is when in charge, be in charge. That doesn't mean that you have to want it. It doesn't mean that you have to thirst or hunger for it. And yet also your people want to be led by you. Let's just remember that. If you've got the L, the leader on your chest, you got to do it. So take it seriously, take charge. And that's not some arcane, heavy-handed, I'm in charge now, but just tell your people, hey, I've been given this responsibility and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I have some reservations. So this is now getting into my second piece of advice. Be honest. Just be honest. With your leadership, I do have reservations about this. And if you can articulate what some of those reservations are, that please do so. I could tell you one of the biggest reservations is a lack of training. All the time we have folks who are put into leadership positions and they've never been invested in training. Just because that person is the most Johnny on the spot crack accountant we have ever seen in the organization does not mean that they know the craft of leadership. They know the craft of finance and they know it well. They know the craft of accounting. They know it well. That's awesome. I would say if training, for example, might be one of the things that you feel that you need, you should probably say that. If you never had the aspiration necessarily to be a leader, that's okay too. You should probably say that as well. And I think that it's not only being honest with yourself, but it's being honest with others. And this brings me back to the thing that you said a few minutes ago about, well, maybe some people take that role because they take the 30% pay increase. Well, I would suggest, okay, well, then that does mean that you want to be a leader, because if you want the rewards, then you get to do the work that comes with it. So, if there's no ramp if you've capped out as an individual contributor and you see that there is a higher earning potential above that and you want that, well, I would suggest that your wants or needs dictate otherwise. Maybe you do want that promotion and maybe you should give it a go. So the two things first and foremost is when in charge, be in charge, step up. And number two, be honest. Share your reservations. Share your reservations with your leadership, and you could share your reservations with your team as well if you feel that's appropriate. I would say do it in an appropriate way. And the thing that I keep thinking about in this conversation, and I may say the name incorrectly, and if I do, I beg forgiveness, but I believe the gentleman's name was Coleman Mockler, who was one of the figures, one of the leaders, the level 5 leaders that Jim Collins called out in Good to Great. And I'll never forget that this person, I believe his name was Coleman Mockler, I don't remember exactly which company he was at the helm of, but he constantly said, my motivation every day was I just wanted to be worthy of the position because I didn't think that it was worthy of the position. And this was a guy who was deemed a level 5 leader in the long run, and that's pretty dang honest for a leader of a massive corporation to just say it.
That's a great call out, because you and I have experienced this plenty. Many of the best leaders we've ever worked with are very humble, and many of them would not consider themselves to be great leaders. They care a great deal about their people. They care a great deal about their mission. Many of them have great stamina. They're very smart. They've got a lot to bring to the table, clearly, and many of them would know that. But most of the very best leaders I've worked with would not put themselves on a pedestal and say, I'm a great leader. And the reason I bring that up is that if you're new to leadership or new to management and you feel like maybe you don't have the skills, or maybe you're not that good at it, or you won't be good at it, take heart in knowing that even some of the world's best leaders, to the day they stepped off the podium, felt like they were not quite where they needed to be, or they were always working to be worthy of the position or the office they were in. So that's not something that's unique to just people who are new to it. I'll offer a couple other little things here that might be helpful to someone that's new in the role and a little apprehensive. Is don't feel like you need to be a whole different person now that you're taking on this role of leader or manager. You still get to be you. You just have a few different duties and responsibilities. And so think about it that way. You don't need to be a different person at all. You need to be the same person who needs to acquire a couple new skills or take on a few new responsibilities. And if you think about it that way, it's probably a lot less daunting. And also, when you do it that way, you get the benefit, I think, of having a better connection with your team. And nothing sours that dynamic more quickly than a person who was once a peer moving to a position of management or leadership, right, and then acting like a totally different person. That's a recipe for disaster.
So annoying.
Yeah, and the way I think you harmonize this with the good points you made, which are when in charge, be in charge, is think of yourself maybe a bit more like a team captain. So yes, you have some additional duties and responsibilities now. Now you have the captain's armband on, and so you're going to have to probably make some decisions. You're going to probably have to let some people know if they're not doing their job, or where they need to get better or play better as a team. Yes, you need to take on some of those additional roles, but don't forget that you're still on the team. You're still part of the team. And I think sometimes we really mess that up as we say, oh, now that you're in the leadership role, you can't be one of the boys anymore, or just one of the gals. Well, yeah, sort of, but you're still on the team. You're still a functioning member of that team. You don't sit outside of the entity now and kind of look down upon it and just direct what's going on. In most kind of junior or mid-level management roles, that person is still very much having to roll their sleeves up, do the work, interface with customers, be part of projects. You just have a little bit of additional role. And so perhaps framing yourself as a bit of a team captain, maybe even sharing that with your coworkers and saying, I'm going to have to take on this role. As you said, I'm going to do my very best. I want to have an open line of communication. I want to take care of you guys and the work. And I don't want to forget that we're still all very much on the same team here. And so if there are issues or challenges, I'd like to know about them. If there are ways that I can help to support you or make you better, I'd like to know about that too. But at the end of the day, it's all hands in the middle, ready, break. It's not some theoretical, you're kind of up in the booth now while looking down on what's going on. That's probably not going to be the case.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the downfalls of somebody who gets pinned as the leader, doesn't want to be the leader, and subsequently behaves in a manner in which they do not actually lead? So they kind of dig their heels in and say, no, I'm not going to do this. even though by title
Hmm.
they're put in that position. What do you think are some of the massive impacts for the organization and the team in such a setting, and the individuals?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's a lot of different contexts through which this might express itself. But the first one that jumped into my head was having a sour attitude toward like the administrative or the logistical or kind of the various processes and paperwork, the things that need to go on that make the bureaucracy effective, kind of begrudging those, trash talking those, giving the old side eye to the monthly report, that kind of thing. I think that can really go badly when someone gets promoted into this role and they kind of look to their brothers and sisters to their left and their right, like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna be in this role now, but like we're still gonna be buddies. I still got you. I'm not gonna become one of them. That's not a good look. So anytime that we're saying there's an us and a them, we're already putting ourselves at a disadvantage.
Right.
But we tell people this all the time. If you're in a leadership role, you are now they. So you better accept the fact that it's kind of one team, one fight, and there's no room for kind of a, well, they said. I've seen plenty of that where the person who's now kind of in charge tries to stay at that squad level. They try to stay in the huddle to such an extent that they build a bit of an us versus them mentality, and that is really detrimental to the health of the organization. It's not such a binary thing as many people might think. And what I mean by that is you don't have to choose either. Now you're a corporate lackey and you're just one of them in your
Right.
suit or whatever, or you're going to kind of go against the man and like, yeah, I'm going to take this title and the pay raise, but I'm just going to kind of stay here and do things more chill or in a different way.
Because
Like
we're going
that
to be
can,
cool. We're still boys.
yeah, exactly. Like actually, it's like The Office where Michael Scott decides to be like cool Mike and he has like the Kangol hat on backwards or whatever.
I
It's like
just,
that's not going to work.
I mean, I just have seen that work out 0% of the time. That's just my observation. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened out there. I'm just telling you my observation. That's all I got on that one. I totally agree. Like you fall into these traps. I think the buddy buddy trap, and it doesn't have to be so binary as you have pointed out. And look, if you've accepted the role, then you kind of have to do the do. I would say one of the massive detriments if you don't is that you probably won't be there for very much longer if you don't kind of take it on. And if you don't want that job, then don't take it. Honestly.
Yeah.
And if you have taken the job and maybe you've given it a try, and we have seen cases where people, they take the job, they give it a try, they step up, they give it the old, honest college go at it, right? And a year into it, they've done perfectly fine, but they just don't want that job. And they say, I'd rather not be in this kind of role. I see myself more in this role as a number two, let's say, instead of a number one. I feel more comfortable with that. Good on you. Good on you
Yeah.
for the self-awareness, for the integrity, the humility, the honesty to be able to say, hey, I'd rather be a number two, and I really care about this organization and what we're doing, and so I'm going to do my very best to help put us in a great place and help us find a number one. Can we do that? Like,
Yeah.
can I help do that? Because I really want to keep doing this. And we have seen that we've seen go quite successfully, and it's frankly, that's pretty admirable. That is candor right there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'll offer one more thing that I think could be helpful for a new leader. And this is something we talk about a lot with organizations is this simple framework of awareness, application, and reflection. And what I really want to speak to directly on this for the new leader is there is a kind of a healthy balance point between, on one end, maybe you feel that leadership is this thing that's out of touch for you, or other people are good at it, but you're not. And to some extent, you need to demystify that a little bit. So I would
Right.
recommend either getting some training, getting some education, boning up on it, talking to a mentor. Definitely help yourself by gathering some information and learning that both management and leadership are practices that people can learn and they can become better at. So strip away the mystery, get yourself some training and education if you can, and learn that this is something that can be taught, practiced, and improved. But we don't want to go too far to the other end. And what I mean by that is we don't want to just read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and watch all the YouTube videos and think that that's an adequate
Right.
proxy for leadership. And so there's got to be this healthy balance of, let's do our best to learn some things. Let's try some things. Let's pay attention and see how they go. And then we can make some adjustments, because it has to be both. And it's the same in everything in life. Just imagine that you really want to get in shape. Well, okay. If you don't know anything about nutrition and exercise, before you start seriously trying to do this, you want to educate yourself a little bit. You might want to get a coach, have someone help you out, get a base level of knowledge so you're not hurting yourself or doing anything crazy or buying snake oil, etc. You also don't want to get paralysis by, reading all the books and buying all the programs. That there's a place for, okay, I know a little bit, I'm going to try some things. I'm going to get up and I'm going to move. I'm going to do some stuff, and I'm going to see how my body responds to it. And then I can make some appropriate adjustments. Leadership's kind of the same way. There's an appropriate dosage of training and education and information. And you don't want to blow way past that without starting to put some stuff into practice and just feeling your way through it a bit.
Yeah, there's no answers at the trailhead, right? I mean, you could sit there at the trailhead and keep looking at the map, and you can keep looking at the pictures of what the summit is going to look like on your All Trails app and all that good stuff, but you are never going to experience the beauty that is the summit unless you actually put your ruck on and start walking. And that's where I will come back to where we started. And I think we could probably circle back and land this, which is to say this: sometimes we get what we need, not what we want. And sometimes it's super unclear why we need that or where we go. And I would just put it this way. In no point in my life did I ever think that I would be a nonprofit organization executive, but I was, for 2, in fact. And it completely enriched and transformed my life. At no part of my life did I ever want or desire to be a small business owner. I never thought I'd be a small business owner. And yet here I am. I'm a small business owner with my good buddy and partner, Blaine Smith. And you know what? It's pretty rad. And it has completely...
And we didn't know what we were doing when we started.
And we didn't know what we were... Yeah, 100%. We've been figuring this out, we're somewhere on the trail, and we don't know where, ultimately the summit ends, but we know that we're still tracking towards it. And so I would just say this: I am a better man right now, today, for having taken the chance, even though I necessarily didn't want these things, to embrace the opportunity and to own it and just try it. And I would just put that out there. If you're out there and you've been thrust into a leadership position for whatever the circumstances are, and I'm confident that there is a ton of context that surrounds this whole thing. Before we go too far, maybe just slow down, get some perspective. Try to think, why am I in this position? Why am I hesitant about this position? What is the next best thing that I can do? How can I best care for the people? Because even if I don't necessarily want to be in charge of the people, I know what it feels like to be the people, and I can give to them what I prefer as the people, especially since I'm so drawn to the individual contributor role. How can I give them their best while I try to figure this out? Give it a try. If you find, 6, 12 months later that it's just still not a good fit for you, be honest about it. Set the organization up for a good context. Set them up so that they can carry on well. But maybe just don't discount the fact that perhaps this is an opportunity that you might not have foreseen, but that might end up being very enriching for your life.
Yeah, I love it. Great question. I didn't know we were going to go with this one, but that was a lot of fun. We love your questions. Send them to us. contact@appliedleadershippartners.com. We read every one. We'd love to get them on the podcast. We appreciate the support. This has been a good one, and we'll see you again soon.